And I want to know, yesterday when you found out Robert Saleh, who you covered in New York, was going to be the next head coach of the Titans, what was your reaction?
Yeah, I was a little surprised, Jared. Not that I didn't think Salah was a legit candidate because he seemingly interviewed for every job. I just felt like looking, from the outside of what Tennessee would do, it felt like they needed an offensive guy because they have Cam Ward in place and you want him to take the next step, especially after watching what Ben Johnson just did with Caleb Williams, after seeing what Liam Cohen has done, of course, with Trevor Lawrence in that same division. It just felt like, hey, maybe they'd lean with an offensive guy, maybe someone with experience like a Mike McCarthy, who I know interviewed for the job. But it's going to be interesting to see. I just heard you talking about Salah's offensive coordinator. That to me is going to be his biggest hire by far. Can he get a legitimate play caller to work for him? Because Salah will fix the defense. The defense will be awesome. That's what he does. The biggest hire for him by far will be, can he get that offensive coordinator situation figured out?
Okay, so I do wonder this. Why did Zach Wilson bust in New York? Because I think Titan fans, I am not a Cam Ward guy. In fact, I think Cam Ward's probably going to be a bust. I think his mechanics are bad. I think he's very limited talent-wise. I think they overdrafted a quarterback, which happens. I think Kyler Murray was overdrafted when he was taken number 1 overall. But I think Titan fans will say, well, Zach Wilson sucks. Cam Ward's way better. But coming out, the gurus had higher grades on Zach Wilson than they did on Cam Ward. Why did Zach Wilson bust? And why should Titan fans, like me, be somewhat optimistic that Robert Saleh can put a plan in place that can get Cam Ward to be successful?
Well, I'll say this. Zach Wilson, I don't know if anyone could have fixed him, right? Like he was that bad. I think when people really take a step back and watch Zach Wilson, you could have told me Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan, they were coaching Zach Wilson. And I truly don't think it would have made that much of a difference, right? Zach Wilson, even since leaving the Jets, right? Everyone brings up Sam Darnold's success since he left the Jets. Well, we saw that with Sam. He showed real potential. We saw flashes of a really good quarterback that was failed by the organization. With Zach Wilson, you really can't say that. The Jets gave him an elite defense. He had Garrett Wilson. He had Breece Hall. He had really good weapons and an offensive line that was good enough for him to certainly show a lot more. And it never really happened. And they had Matt LaFleur, Salah's first 2 years as the offensive coordinator. And LaFleur, who's the brother of Matt, he showed some things with every quarterback besides Zach Wilson. They all played better. So it's tough to just strictly blame Salah for Zach Wilson busting. I just think he was one of those guys that ultimately just wasn't that good. His success happened in a COVID year against a weak competition at BYU in 2020. He was overdrafted, and I just think a lot of people got it wrong with him. It's just such a tough position to evaluate. If the Jets didn't take Wilson at 2, I know for a fact Shanahan and the Niners would have drafted him at 3 instead of Trey Lance. So it's an inexact science, I think, at the end of the day. So I don't put that all on Robert Saleh. I don't know if Zach Wilson was fixable. And I think there's more evidence to that too, right? He goes to Denver and sits behind Sean Payton for a year, never gets an opportunity. Miami can't wait to sign him as their backup to Tua. And when it was time to actually bench Tua and play a different quarterback, they didn't play Zach Wilson, who had been sitting for the last 2 years, and give him a chance as a former number 2 pick. They played a 7th-round pick in Quinn Ewers at the end of their season. So I just don't know if anyone could have fixed Zach Wilson.
So is it fair to say that, in your opinion, when it comes to the culpability that Robert Saleh has for Zach Wilson being a bust, you put that somewhere around 0?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably not 0, Jared, but it's definitely not. I've seen some people just blaming Salah for Zach Wilson, and I think that's really disingenuous. If you want to get on Salah, I think his mentality, his mindset as a head coach, let's be the first, first to 20 will win this one, kind of goes against what the modern NFL now is. Like, you got to be able to score points. You got to be able to have innovative offensive scheme to be successful. And the defense can almost at times be complimentary. I think you can question maybe his mindset as a head coach and whether or not that stunted some, definitely not all, but some of the development of Zach Wilson as a QB. But, ultimately, the biggest issue that Robert Saleh had was the instability at quarterback and then the offensive coordinator situation, right? By the time he had Aaron Rodgers, well, you had Nate Hackett with him, and then Rodgers, of course, went down that first year for 4 plays. So I just think it's tough to put Zach Wilson busting just on Saleh. He's not blameless because they also had Sam Darnold when he first got there. And despite whatever you'll hear from anyone trying to spin it otherwise, Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas were both on board moving on from Sam Darnold and drafting Zach Wilson. So I know that's going to be out there. The PR spin, oh, it was all, Joe Douglas wanted Zach Wilson and it wasn't Salah. I could tell you for a fact that is not true. But ultimately, they made the big mistake. I mean, the Jets maybe could have been a completely different team had they stuck with Sam Darnold, traded the number 2 pick, maybe took Jamar Chase in a trade down and built out the team. Who knows what would have happened?
By the way, I would just like for the record to show that Jake brought up Sam Darnold, not me, that this was not me who, again, I went to the Titans last year and I said, you need to sign Sam Darnold, trade back in the draft. And because I didn't think Cam was that good. And the Titans were like, no, you don't understand. And I feel somewhat validated as far as vindicated, I should say, on that front. Okay, Jake, Robert Saleh's tenure, 20-36 as a head coach. How much of that was the Jets are kind of stinky, and they were stinky under Todd Bowles, and they were stinky under Adam Gase, and Todd Bowles is a better coach than Adam Gase, and they're stinky under Aaron Glenn, and I think Robert Saleh is probably a better coach than Aaron Glenn. You would know that better than me. How much of Robert Saleh's 20-36 record is Robert Saleh's fault, and how much of it is the Jets organization's fault?
50-50, I would say. Again, I maybe will come across to your audience as someone who's negative on anti-Salah, but I'm really not. I actually could see this being successful in Tennessee. Now, you're not a big believer in Cam Ward, so that might be doomed from the start here, but assuming that Cam Ward is not a bust and is a good quarterback, and they pair him up with the right play caller, whether it be Bobby Slowick, who'd make a lot of sense, or, of course, the dream would be Mike McDaniel if he would take the job. I could see it working because the QB and OC situation was definitely the biggest problem. However, Robert Saleh still went 20-36 as a head coach. And it wasn't just because the quarterback play was bad. The Jets routinely were outcoached anytime they were in any sort of big game. They were abysmal against the teams in their own division. They were horrible coming off bye weeks or anytime they had extra time to prepare. So they play a Thursday night game and they had 10 days to get ready. Terrible in those set of circumstances. When they had the rest advantage, right? Maybe a team played Monday night and they had a short week and that would favor the Jets. They were awful in those spots. They would routinely come out flat in the first half of games. And while they would adjust at times in the second half, it was too little too late. The penalties were a problem. There was a discipline issue at times. It felt like a hallmark of a solid team was anytime there was some adversity, they would fold. They were very front runners at times. The clock management left a lot to be desired. So again, a lot of this can be cleaned up if you have a great quarterback that can mask your deficiencies. And maybe he will improve as a head coach after learning from what happened in New York and getting a chance to kind of reset before being a head coach again. But I think people out there are just saying, well, he never had a quarterback and that's why he went 20-36. And I think that is disingenuous. That's part of it. But anyone who actually watched every snap of every game like I did of Robert Saleh's tenure, I think he benefited from the fact when he was fired, the Jets were 2-3 playing for first place. Woody Johnson, the worst owner you could argue in the NFL, fires Robert Saleh after just those 5 games. The team then spirals. They only win 3 games the rest of the way. Aaron Glenn comes in as a disaster, even worse than Saleh in his first year. So people basically blame it all on the Jets, and Saleh had nothing to do with his record. And again, that's a bit disingenuous. I don't think he's a terrible coach. I could see this working out, but I don't think it's as foregone conclusion was all the Jets and Saleh's this great coach that was screwed over.
So if I was Mike Borgonzi, the general manager of the Titans, Jake, and I called you before I made this hire, this is assuming that Borgonzi made the hire, which there's some disputing as to whether or not that was the case or not, but who knows? And I said, Jake, should I risk my career? Because general managers don't get second chances. Should I risk my career on Robert Saleh? What would you say?
I'd say no, honestly, because to me, he needed to go somewhere where the quarterback was already established, not a guy that is still developing. I think if Robert Saleh took a job where, I'll throw out the Ravens, for example, he interviewed for that job, where he didn't have to worry about Lamar Jackson, he's a league MVP already, and could just fix the defense and do everything else, I could see it working. That was actually the plan with Aaron Rodgers, essentially, right? You bring him in, you're coming off a 7-win season, you have the reigning offensive and defensive rookie of the year. The defense was top 3. You had an elite kicker in Greg Zuerlein. We'll get to him in a moment because he's a big reason why the Jets fell apart in 2024. But that was their plan. Saleh coached the hell out of the defense, go out there, have the team ready to play, and Aaron Rodgers will give you competent quarterback play, and you'll win 10 games and end the longest playoff drought in sports. It all fell apart when Rodgers got hurt and they had no real backup plan, the GM failed Salah by not having a legitimate backup quarterback and just sticking with Zach Wilson until it was too late. So it's not, again, all on Salah, but I wouldn't risk my career hiring him because he's proven that he has no feel for the offensive side of the ball. And I think the risk you have when you hire Salah now, say he does hire Mike McDaniel as his OC, and let's say that Cam Ward is not a bust, he plays great. Well, then all of a sudden, Mike McDaniel is going to be a top guy to get another head coaching job. You lose him, you then have to replace him. And we've seen this. It's hard to always replace your offensive coordinator. I know Mike Vrabel hired 2 OCs that became head coaches. Eventually, you just run out of guys. Todd Bowles went through the same thing now in Tampa, having to replace his OC for the third time in 3 years. This year, it just wasn't the same. You could say the same thing about Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia. Like, it is hard when you're a defensive guy and it's an offensive league. When you have success as a team, you lose your OC a lot of times. And that, to me, would be the struggle that Salah could run into. Now, Titans fans might be hearing that saying, who cares? We'll worry about that if we're back in the playoffs and we're a respectable team again and Cam Ward looks good. We'll deal with it then. But that's why if I was, staking my career on getting this hire right as a GM, you might only get one coaching hire. I would hire a guy with an offensive background or someone who's a proven head coach rather than the projection that Salah, what happened in New York, he learned from it and now will be a very good head coach.
Jake, there have been some comps about the Titans are going back and hiring the next Mike Vrabel or somebody very similar to Mike Vrabel, defensive coach, leader of men. Vrabel, and I know he doesn't openly project this, Vrabel could be kind of sensitive to criticism, especially behind the scenes. Do you see, again, I know you don't cover Vrabel the way that we covered Vrabel, but do you see the comparisons between Salah and Vrabel? Because I'm not sure I do.
I don't see it at all. I mean, I actually thought it was laughable that, there were people out there trying to compare the two situations because Mike Vrabel, to me, is an excellent strategist. He's excellent in-game with adjustments, excellent in-game with clock management. I mean, he outsmarted Belichick in a playoff game over the rules, as you guys know all too well in Tennessee. To me, he's a phenomenal head coach. And Robert Saleh, I don't think is anywhere close to Mike Vrabel. I was pounding my hand over fist when the Jets finished 7-10 in 2023. And Mike Vrabel was out there after he got fired. Hire him now. He's got the relationship with Rodgers. Bring him in. Mike Vrabel could have been coaching the Jets in 2024. Instead, they go into 2024 with Robert Saleh. The owner already had doubts on the guy and pulled the plug 5 games in, completely wrecked the season. And then they tried to interview Vrabel. They did. And then, of course, when New England opened up their vacancy by firing Mayo, that was to prevent Vrabel from going to the Jets. So the Jets had Salah, and they realized Mike Vrabel would have been a much better option. So I don't see the similarities at all, other than they're both big and strong. And if you're doing like a power rankings of like the coaches you'd least want to fight in the NFL, they probably would be in the top 3 on your list.
It's funny because with Vrabel, the things I always tell people, Vrabel in Tennessee. Now, this may be different in New England, and I think Bob Kraft probably got some pretty good intel on Vrabel and said basically like, Josh McDaniels is going to be the coordinator because I'm not trusting you to hire one. But when it comes to what Vrabel did, Vrabel, to your point, he knew the rule book inside and out. And he researched it. He played a trick on Todd Bowles years ago by sending a guy out there and taking a penalty and giving the Jets a first down to save timeouts at the end of the game. We know the clock thing with Belichick. And Vrabel got the most out of his players in terms of effort. Vrabel always got, for the most part, good effort. His coaching staff at the end here in Tennessee was a disaster. Todd Downing, Tim Kelly, those bums. It was a train wreck.
The Jets brought them all to New York. Salah couldn't wait to hire. You didn't even mention Keith Carter. That was our O-line coach. It was a disaster here.
I asked Vrabel in 2019, are you going to fire Keith Carter? And he was like, no. Then I found out during COVID, Keith Carter and I lived by each other. It was kind of awkward. But again, like Salah brought in the Vrabel rejects that got him fired here in Nashville. How nervous should that make me as far as putting the staff together is concerned?
Yeah, look, again, Salah hired a hell of a defensive staff with the Jets. If you go and look at some of the assistants, I mean, all of them got jobs right away. They're all highly regarded. I mean, Jeff Ulbrich was his DC. He was a guy that Arthur Blank, the Falcons owner, said, we got to keep this guy. Basically said, Kevin Stefanski, we want you as the head coach, but we want to make sure Ulbrich's the DC. He hired a really good defensive staff. The offensive staff was a disaster. Not probably, I can tell you this as someone who's a diehard fan of this awful Jets team. There was not one offensive player that improved under the direction of Salah and that staff. No one got better. The offensive line was a joke. I mean, sure, you could say, oh, well, they have Breece Hall and they have Garrett Wilson. Those guys were great right away. Garrett was the rookie of the year his first season, obviously, and Breece would have won the award if he didn't tear his ACL in week 8 of that year. He was the favorite when he got hurt. So then his teammate Garrett won it instead. No one got better on that side of the ball. So the offensive staffing hires, that's alarming because he did hire a bunch of guys that weren't good enough for Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. That's a fact. And I think the other big thing that you have to look at with Salah is, well, he'll hire a great defensive staff. He's now going to be calling the plays on defense. So, what does that mean for the offensive direction here? Does it heighten the importance of bringing in a legit OC? I think it does. So I think it really comes down to, can the offensive coordinator maximize Cam Ward? Salah's betting his coaching career that Cam Ward's going to be a franchise guy and he has the right coaching to elevate him. That will define him. I mean, Vrabel got Josh McDaniels to be his OC and help Drake May take his game to the next level. So much of this league is coach and quarterback. And when you're not an offensive play caller, it's coach, quarterback, and then your OC for that quarterback.
Okay, I have to ask you, because I did read the Athletic article where they said that Salah was really sensitive to criticism. He called everybody in and demanded to know who the leaker was, which, again, these are grown men coaching in the NFL. This is not. Hey, nobody gets in trouble. Just tell us who it was. The criticism he did not like from the press. How much will dealing with Nashville as opposed to New York make things easier, in your opinion, for Salah?
I will say this. One of the things Salah does have going for him is that Nashville is definitely a different media market than New York. And I love Nashville. I'm, excited to hopefully go to that Jets-Titans game next year. But it's a different vibe as someone who's been there before compared to, obviously what comes with coaching in New York, and especially the Jet job, right? The Jets, whoever the coach of the Jets is, they inherit the longest playoff drought in sports. And when Salah got here, that was still the case, obviously. And they were coming off a 2-win season. And, it's tough. You win 4 games your first year, then you only win 7 in year 2, but they were 6-3, 7-4, and then they collapsed and finished 7-10. They make the Aaron Rodgers move and it all falls apart. So there was mounting criticism. And again, as we talked about, some of it was not all on Robert Saleh, but he does hear all the noise. And he does go out of his way to be very good with the media. You could see, like, the PR team Salah's got, like all the national guys, all the local guys on the Jets beat. Everyone can't wait to say nice things about Salah because he was accessible. He'll talk to you off the record. He'll help you do your job. So from a media standpoint, the people covering him will like him because he is truly a genuine, nice guy. He's a good person. I want to see him do well. But I do think the fact that he's out of New York and he's going to a smaller market, I think that will be better for him because I do think he tried to control the narrative too much. And that just takes away from you doing the job of being a head coach if you're focused on things that aren't related to trying to win games in the NFL.
All right, Jake, last one for you. What is the worst organization, the Titans or the Jets?
Man, I mean, I guess it has to be the Jets, right? I mean, the playoff drought speaks for itself. Haven't made the playoffs in 2010. Haven't won more than 7 games in 2015. I mean, as bad as the Titans might be, and as someone who used to live in Houston for 6 years doing radio there, I followed the AFC South closely, of course. The Titans did have Mike Vrabel. I know, obviously, getting rid of him is terrible, and Tennessee hasn't recovered since. But at least you guys hired a legit head coach, and you were in an AFC Championship game with Ryan Tannehill as your quarterback. I mean, maybe I'm too close to it as a Jet fan who talks about them every day for a living, but I don't think there's a worse organization in sports right now than the New York Jets.
The one thing I would say is I was going to say, well, it is a bad look that the Titans fired their coach and he's in the AFC Championship game, but the Jets drafted a quarterback number 3 overall and he's in the NFC Championship game and he may be, he may end up winning the Super Bowl. And so that's probably a bad look in and of itself. I will say Amy Adams Strunk's a really bad owner, or at least has been really bad lately. I'm not sure there's a worse owner in the league than Woody Johnson, and that includes Jimmy Haslam and Mark Davis. Am I wrong for thinking that?
No, I mean, again, it's tough to defend Woody right now, right? I mean, he makes the move firing Salah, and if you had doubts on Salah, why is he not fired after 2023, right? You're blowing up that season at 2-3. This year, this was one of the more obvious one and dones I've ever seen. I'm someone who covered David Culley and Lovie Smith back-to-back years when I was in Houston watching that debacle. I mean, Aaron Glenn will be he will be, and I've used this comp on the show all the time on radio here. He's going to be this year's Brian Callahan. When the Jets start 1-5, he will be fired with the same record that Brian Callahan had, right? It was like 4-19 when Callahan was fired. And the only thing I think that might save the Jets is, thank God Dante Moore went back to school, because now they can't draft him and potentially, try and use that as an excuse to get more time. Oh, we need to develop our QB. No. You're not going to be able to get that guy pick 2. So, getting it back to Woody, I mean, he's a terrible owner. The hires are terrible. They keep hiring first-time defensive-minded coaches and not trying to do anything else. He listens to the wrong people. He's got a bunch of yes men in his corner. The Jets raised season ticket prices coming off a 3-win season. And
no,
again,
they did not.
They did. They have not made the playoffs since 2010, and most season ticket holders got some sort of price increase, which is just asinine. I mean, I could keep going, but I don't want to bore your audience to tears. Woody Johnson, I think, is right now the worst owner. Forget in the NFL, but you could make a case he's the worst owner in all of sports.